Number 7. Ohio-class submarines. With a fully submerged displacement of 18,750 tons, the Ohio-class vessels are the largest submarines ever built for the United States Navy and the world's third largest submarines. The class consists of 18 boats total, including 14 ballistic missile submarines or SSBNs and 4 cruise missile submarines or SSGNs. At one point in time, all 18 Ohio-class subs were ballistic missile submarines. During the mid-1990s, the decision was made to convert 14 of them into cruise missile submarines: the USS Ohio, USS Florida, USS Michigan, and USS Georgia. Each Ohio-class SSGN has a payload capacity of up to 154 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles, which are stored in up to 22 missile tubes. The missile tubes also have room for storing food and other consumables, as well as certain equipment. Each SSGN can accommodate up to 66 crew members at a time. The 14 Ohio-class SSBNs are part of the U.S. military's nuclear deterrent triad. In layman's terms, a nuclear deterrent triad is a combination of land, sea, and air-based missiles that are meant to eliminate an enemy's ability to destroy the country's nuclear forces in a first strike attack. In other words, these submarines are armed to the hilt with explosives that are ready to launch on command should the need arise. And while the Ohio-class ships fall behind the Russian Typhoon and Boreai-class when it comes to size, they're capable of carrying more missiles than both competing classes, with a carrying capacity of 20 Trident II missiles each. Number 6. The Typhoon-class submarines. Measuring 575 feet long, the Soviet-designed Typhoon-class submarines are the largest submarines ever built. Also known under the designated Soviet name Project 941 Akula, 6 of these gargantuan nuclear-powered ballistic missile ships were produced for the Soviet Navy between the late 1970s and the late 1980s. Each vessel had enough room to accommodate a crew of 160 for months at a time. Russia's Typhoon-class submarines were developed as a response to America's Ohio-class vessels. The original goal was to match the armament of the Ohio-class subs with a significantly longer range. This is why the Typhoon-class vessels were much larger and heavier than their American counterparts. As the Cold War drew to a close in the early 90s, there were proposals to refit some Typhoon-class submarines into cargo vessels for shipping oil, gas, and cargo to Russia's remote far northern territories. With a carrying capacity of over 11,000 tons and the ability to travel beneath polar ice, it would have been a good use for the ships. The Russian Navy also made plans to modernize its Typhoon-class subs in a military fashion, but the program was cancelled in 2012. The last remaining Typhoon-class vessel, the Dmitry Donsky, functioned as a missile testing platform until its decommissioning in 2022. It is currently on reserve along with other members of its class, the Arkhangelsk and the Severstal, which have sat for years without any solid decisions on whether they'll be preserved or dismantled. Have you ever seen the inside of a submarine? Tell us in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 5. Russia's nuclear deterrent force. Only 5 countries are confirmed to have a nuclear deterrent triad: the United States, Russia, China, India, and Pakistan. And Israel is the only country that's suspected of having a nuclear deterrent triad. The ballistic submarine component of Russia's triad is mostly made up of Boreai-class submarines, which were built starting in the mid-90s in a bid to replace the country's aging Delta III, Delta IV, and Typhoon-class fleet. Design work on the Boreai-class started out in the 1980s, and construction on the first vessel began in 1996. The Boreai-class submarine entered service in 2013. At 557 feet long, the Boreai-class submarines are nearly as long as their record-holding Typhoon-class predecessors, but they're much smaller, with half of the displacement tonnage of the Typhoon-class and enough room to accommodate a crew of 107 personnel, 53 less than the Typhoon subs. The Boreai group represents some of the Russian Navy's most advanced technology and is enabling the military to patrol southern latitudes that have not seen a Russian missile submarine in 2 decades. Although the Cold War ended during the 90s, the continued development of nuclear submarine technology proves that the competition between the US and Russia for military superiority remains strong. The Boreai-class subs that serve on the nuclear deterrent force are joined by 4 newly developed Khabarovsk-class submarines. Each Khabarov sub is equipped with 6 nuclear-powered drone torpedoes that are capable of traveling across oceans and hitting coastal cities and military bases. These bombs are powerful enough to do 10 times more damage than the nuclear weapons that the US dropped on Japan during World War II. As tensions escalate between Putin's government and the growing number of countries who disagree with his increasingly aggressive actions over the last few years, Russia's nuclear deterrent force is ready to respond on a moment's notice to any perceived instigation by NATO forces. In early 2022, around the same time Russian forces invaded Ukraine, Putin put the country's nuclear deterrent force on high alert, signifying his intentions to escalate the conflict. Number 4. America's nuclear deterrent force. The United States first began developing its nuclear deterrent triad during the 1960s in preparation for nuclear blows with the Soviet Union. Of course, the world's leaders hoped it would never come to that, but they planned for it just in case. By forcing the USSR to prepare for a potential nuclear strike from the land, air, and sea, the US gained an upper hand, for the time being at least. During the 1960s, the number of US-commissioned deployment-ready delivery vehicles that were capable of carrying nuclear warheads peaked in 1967 at 2,268. From the 1970s until the introduction of the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, or START, in 1991, the number of vehicles hovered between 1,875 and 2,200. This START limited America's maximum number of delivery vehicles to 1,600 and its total number of warheads to 6,000, and the country continuously reduced both over the following decades. As of 2009, the US had reduced its count to 2,200 warheads and 850 delivery vehicles. In 2010, a new START treaty went into effect. Since then, the US has further scaled back on its nuclear arsenal while focusing on modernizing the systems it plans to keep. Despite these reduced numbers, the Obama administration made it clear that the country will maintain a nuclear deterrent triad for the foreseeable future. By doing so, America ensures its ability to carry out a nuclear strike even if one or two of the triad's legs are rendered inoperable. Efforts to downsize are nevertheless ongoing, with the most recent comprehensive plan being released in 2018. The program's release came on the heels of the Trump administration's Nuclear Posture Review, which stated in clear terms that the US supports the elimination of nuclear weapons worldwide. For now, the country's leaders are making baby steps towards that ultimate goal while awaiting the day when nuclear weapons are deemed no longer necessary. Number 3. Russia's nuclear submarine disposal problem. Some of the most threatening nuclear-powered submarines are dangerous not because of their armament, but because they've been taken out of service and left to rot in the world's oceans and seas. This is particularly a big problem in the waters off Russia, and it's this direct product of the historically infamous Cold War arms race between the US and the Soviet Union. It's unclear whether either country was thinking about how it would one day dispose of outdated nuclear weapons and vehicles. But in the post-Cold War era, both superpowers have realized just how complicated, time-consuming, and expensive this task truly is, especially when it comes to retired nuclear submarines and ships. Even in the United States, with a detailed program and funding securely in place, getting rid of these old vessels is a truly monumental task. The situation is much worse in Russia, which appears to lack both a comprehensive plan and the money to properly dispose of its aging nuclear-powered naval ships. It's also unlikely that the country has enough money to properly maintain these vessels to prevent nuclear leakage as they languish in the water with an uncertain future. Of the 244 nuclear subs the Soviet Union produced during the Cold War, 180 of them have been taken out of service, mostly because the government did not have enough money to keep them operational following the collapse of the Iron Curtain. Under Russia's current system, only 3 to 6 vessels can be dismantled per year, resulting in a horrendous backlog that only seems to be worsening as the current fleets continue to age. In the past, the Soviet Union dumped reactor coolant and other low-level liquid radioactive wastes directly into the sea. The practice was forbidden in 1972 by the London Dumping Convention, and modern Russian leaders have promised to comply with the terms of the agreement, which also banned the scuttling of nuclear vessels. But whether or not Russia can realistically live up to these promises without help from other countries is highly questionable and remains to be seen. Based on the sheer number of nuclear-powered submarines that were produced, Soviet leaders clearly did not plan for the Cold War to end peacefully or for the USSR to go broke like it did. It would explain why they had no effective plan in place for safely dismantling and scrapping these vessels. Roughly 110 of Russia's decommissioned submarines still have operating nuclear reactors. Because the country has nowhere to store liquid waste or spent fuel, Many of these vessels are currently manned by skeleton crews. At one point in time, a country's failure to properly dispose of its military hardware may have been largely considered that country's problem. But it's a different story when it comes to nuclear materials and the dangers they pose. Russia's problem is a concern to the international community at large, and the solution will most likely require outside countries to provide Russia with an influx of financial assistance, something that the US is arguably in one of the best positions to give, but one of the last things American leaders are keen to do, especially amid the ongoing war in Ukraine. Number 2. The USS Enterprise. The former USS Enterprise, also known as CVN-65, became the US Navy's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in 1958. At 1,123 feet long, she's also the longest naval vessel ever built. Building the Enterprise came at the immense cost of $451.3 million. Roughly the equivalent of $4.35 billion in 2021. Dismantling and disposing of the ship will also be extremely expensive and time-consuming. The vessel was deactivated in 2012, and in 2017, she became the first decommissioned nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. The defueling process began in 2013 in Newport News, Virginia. Since then, more than 35,000 pounds of steel has been removed from the previous Enterprise and repurposed for the future Enterprise aircraft carrier, also known as CVN-80. CVN-65's final nuclear reactor was defueled in 2016, but the ship has yet to be fully dismantled. For now, the recycling process is on hold while the Navy seeks a more technically executable, environmentally responsible disposal method for the retired aircraft carrier. In 2022, the military announced its tentative plans to contract with a commercial dismantlement facility due to the heavy workload at Puget Sound, where numerous decommissioned nuclear vessels are already awaiting dismantlement. According to a draft report, the quickest route will still take at least 5 years and will cost an estimated $554 to $696 million. The two alternatives listed in the report would also each take at least 15 years and come to a cost of $1.1 to $1.35 billion. The Navy also reportedly considering a no-action alternative, which means that the Enterprise would be put into long-term storage while officials try to come up with a better plan for it. And at number 1, the NS Savannah. During the late 1950s, then-President Dwight D. Eisenhower embarked on a campaign to promote the use of nuclear technology for peaceful purposes known as the Atoms for Peace Initiative. As part of his vision, he ordered the construction of the world's first ever nuclear-powered merchant ship, the NS Savannah. Built in New Jersey, the nearly 600-foot-long government-funded vessel was one of just 4 nuclear-powered cargo ships ever built. She was also designed to function as a passenger ship with 30 staterooms, multiple lounges, a bar, a 75-seat dining room, a dance floor, a swimming pool, and a promenade deck. The Savannah operated for just a decade, from 1962 to 1972. Passenger service lasted for just 3 years before it was discontinued in 1965. Only 848 civilians ever traveled aboard the ship, which would perhaps explain why its interior remains pristine even to this day. With atomic and chemistry-themed sculptures, light fixtures, wall hangings, and even diningware, as well as the geometric, brightly colored furniture and illuminated glass tabletops, stepping onto the Savannah is like stepping back in time to the bygone era of excitement over the advent of atomic energy. After being taken out of service and moving several times, the vessel was moored at the Canton Marine Terminal in Baltimore, Maryland, where she remains to this day with an uncertain future. Like any nuclear-powered vessel, the process of fully decommissioning the Savannah is more complicated than it would be for any other type of ship. At the same time, allowing the Savannah to languish in a deteriorating state is also not an option due to the environmental and health hazards that it poses. Within a year of being taken out of service, the Savannah was defueled, but she's been hanging in limbo for more than a half-century now. The ship is occasionally open for tours, and then there's been talk of turning her into a museum ship, but a lack of funding has prevented these plans from moving forward. In recent years, the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission proposed a multi-step program that would take 7 years from start to finish. As of late 2023, the program appears to be in its second phase, which involves the actual dismantling of the ship. The Savannah's low-pressure reactor has been removed and taken to a radioactive waste facility, and the project is ongoing. Thanks for watching. Which one of these submarines impressed you the most? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you soon. Bye for now.